I've demonstrated perfectly. I'm done with you for now. Thank you, Lynn. It demonstrated perfectly what I'm talking about tonight, which is moving in the flow. Because we had talked about having Lynn dance while Julia sang, and then we had some miscommunication. We weren't sure, and then I just realized this morning that she had written me and said, I'm going to do it to a different song, but we already had Julia scheduled to sing, so that's a bonus for you. We got both. And I found that it was really perfect because I wanted to be with you, when you were singing, and it was really lovely. That is called moving with the flow. That when life doesn't show up the way you planned, you get these surprises, you can resist it or you can move with it. And how perfect that they were moving with it. So, but we've added an extra piece to the service, so I have to cut my message down a little bit. And I had a couple of quotes about that. Somebody once asked President Woodrow Wilson how long it took him to prepare a speech. And he said, it depends. If I'm to speak 10 minutes, I need a week to prepare. If it's 15 minutes, 3 days. If it's half an hour, I need 2 days. If it's an hour, I'm ready right now. And Mark Twain said, I could never make a good impromptu speech without at least several hours to prepare for it. And then one of my favorite ministers and authors, Barbara Brown Taylor, I was watching a video of her speaking at Riverside Church in New York City, and she said this. She said, I am an Episcopalian. We preach very short sermons. When I'm finished, if you haven't had enough, please raise your hand and I'll start again. So I come from a tradition, I grew up with a tradition where the minister spoke from inspiration. And if he got real inspired, we might be there a while. So I am inspired, but I'm going to honor your time tonight. So I'm going to get right into it. So we're talking about moving with the flow. Have you ever had a plan and then something happened? Anybody? Have you ever had that experience? Had a great plan, had it all figured out, it was going to be great. And then something happened. And there's usually a moment of just kind of a little grip, just kind of, and it hurts because that's not what I wanted to happen. That is resistance. Michael Beckwith says there are 4 kinds of pain in the world: resistance, 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 and resistance. The thing that happened to our plan is not the problem. It's our resistance. When life changes, when those unforeseen circumstances come upon us, that's not the problem. The problem is that we're unable to move and respond because we become rigid and fixed, locked in, and it hurts because things aren't going according to our plan. Do you know anyone who's fighting aging? Don't have to raise your hands. And and I keep kind of looking for it. I've always had older friends, and when I turned 40, it was like, well, I feel fine. Should I feel bad about turning 40? I don't feel. I turned 50 last year, and I was like, oh, no, it seems okay. Because here's the way, the fact that I'm here at all is kind of a miracle of the way I lived in my 20s, but I got to be young. I had that experience. Every year that you're supposed to get, I got it. I got to be 15 all the way up to 35, we'll call that, I got to be every one of those years. Now, some of them I don't remember as well, but I had that experience, and now I'm middle-aged, and I'm enjoying it. I really don't want to be young. And if I could take my 51-year-old brain back to my 19-year-old body, maybe. But I'm not really resisting it. Now, I have other things I do resist, but I do have friends that are fighting it tooth and nail. And it's just interesting to see because, we can look and go, well, it's going to happen. We're here for a time. These bodies are not meant to last forever. Even Charles Fillmore, who really tried, he thought he was going to live forever in the body and keep regenerating, and he didn't. That's not the design. That's not what life is trying to reveal to us. So the pain is not in getting older, if this is you. The pain is in your resistance. And the freedom is in your acceptance. and you're allowing what is happening to happen. We experience less pain and more joy when we move with the flow of life. Anybody up for less pain and more joy? Let go. Let go. So one of the things that happens, well, have you seen this picture? This won the National Geographic Prize last year. What are you seeing here? Camels in the desert, right? Now, if you look a little closer, the camel is actually the white part at the bottom, and that's the shadow. Are you seeing that? Can you see that it's an overhead shot of a herd of camels walking across the desert? It's not what you thought you were seeing. Your perspective shifts. Now you can see the camel and the shadow. Do you see it? Yeah. That the black part is not the camel. The white part underneath is the camel. You're looking at the shadow at sunset. I'm showing you this to illustrate a point, is that sometimes we think we're seeing something and we're really sure because that's what it looks like. But our perspective is flawed. Sometimes, maybe take aging for an example. This seems to be a terrible, tragic thing that is happening to me. It's actually a wonderful thing that is happening for you. You're getting to experience this next stage of life. And you know, many people do not get to experience that. Many people don't make it to being an old person. I want to get really old and really be a cool old guy. That's my goal. I really do. We hold to what we know. I like this one too. The guy on the left says 6. The other guy says 9. Just because you are right does not mean that I am wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. When we get locked into a single perspective, I can only see it from my side. I mean, look, it's a 6. What's wrong with you? It's a 6. Has anybody ever done that? Have you ever had that done to you? When you can clearly see that they're wrong, but they are insisting that they're right, it's because we're locked into a perspective. One of the hallmarks of spiritual evolution is the ability to hold multiple perspectives. Do I need to say that again? One of the hallmarks of spiritual evolution is the ability to hold multiple perspectives. It's hard. It gets easier the more you do it, but where you practice, I can really see the 6, but could I imagine myself on the other side? Could I put myself in somebody else's shoes and see it from another way? And when we do that, we're free. That resistance goes away, and we have this ability to be okay, even though it's not exactly what we thought. This comes from the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from his book, The Art of Happiness, that's it. This is a story that he tells in the book. Once there was a disciple of a Greek philosopher who was commanded by his master for 3 years to give money to everyone who insulted him. And when this period of trial was over, the master said to him, "Now you can go to Athens and learn wisdom." And when the disciple was entering Athens, he met at the gate a certain wise man who sat insulting everybody who came and went. And he also insulted the disciple, who burst out laughing. "Why do you laugh when I insult you?" said the wise man. "Because," said the disciple, "for 3 years I have been paying for this kind of thing, and now you give it to me for nothing." The wise man said, "Enter into the city, it is yours." I want you to think right now of an injustice that was done to you. Don't go too deep into the feelings of it. Just remember some of the facts of it. Just remember an injustice. Now, as you're kind of telling the story in your head, I want you to stick with just the facts, just the things that are verifiable, not your experience, just the facts. As you do this, what most of us experience is that the story thins. The meaning, the pain that we have in the story is everything we add to it. Our perspective, locked in. She betrayed me. That's a story we tell. The first time I heard this idea that they're not doing it to you, they're just doing it, I thought, well, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. Or, have you heard this one? Everybody really does the best they can. I didn't believe that. Clearly, they could do better. If they could, and they should, if they saw it the way I see it, they would do better, and they ought to. Locked in my perspective. When we can allow, and I just ask as a thought experiment, if you're holding something, if you really were betrayed, and it does happen in this life, and you're having a hard time letting go, I'm not telling you that by forgiving them and trying to see it from another perspective will make it okay or condone what happened. That's not it. But if you can hold the possibility that if they could have done better, they would have, then it gives a little space, a little spaciousness that maybe there's another way of looking at this. And what we're really talking about here is surrender. Giving up that locked-in perspective, giving up that idea, taking everything personally, like the disciple at the gate. Can you imagine? I'm sure his teacher, it's just a made-up story, but let's go with it. You imagine his teacher, he probably was a student who was taking everything personally, who was getting bent out of shape and offended a lot. And so the teacher thought, I'll fix him. He's going to have to pay money to everyone who insults him. And after 3 years, he no longer took it personally. He had shifted out of his perspective of they're doing it to me. I had a blinding revelation. I've shared it here a couple of times before. But when I am in this place of resistance, sometimes I will resist a day or a week or longer because I want it to be the way I want it to be, and it's not, and it just hurts. But eventually I'll get in enough pain that I will say the prayer of surrender. Okay, God, I give up. It's usually the last thing I try. But I have come upon a blinding discovery that the prayer of surrender can be the first thing we try. I know, I didn't believe it either, but it really works. I see you're stunned. It's true. Before we get locked into all that pain of our resistance, at the very beginning, to hand it over to God, to say, I don't know how this is going to be. I don't have enough perspective to really know all the answers, but I know that this one little way I've got locked in is not the only way. And one of the ways that this shows up for me, it has a lot in the past, is when I had a job that I liked and it paid well, and I thought that was my source. Have you ever had this experience? And then it goes away. I had a great job in Dallas for many years when I was a piano bar singer and player, and I worked at the Mansion on Turtle Creek. Very, very fancy. I worked there for a long time. Got to sing a duet with Billy Joel one time. I met Julia Child one time. It was a really interesting time. But it was a great gig, and it paid well, and I loved it, and it went away. They reformatted their design. They didn't want a singer. They just wanted a jazz combo. My perspective was, this is how God delivers good to me, was this job. And it was gone. And as long as I was locked into this is the way it has to happen, I was hurting. But when I surrendered and said, this is a channel, not the source, other things opened up. I had started ministerial school. I was ready to give up ministerial school because I didn't have the money to pay. I no longer had a way to pay for ministerial school. This was my thinking. And so I was going to quit ministerial school. I was going to go travel. I had all this thing. And then I got a phone call. And an angel in my community in Dallas said, you know what? I want to pay for your ministerial school. Because Because my source has many channels to bring my good to me. If we can open up and surrender and allow something else to happen. So, I'm going to close here in a minute, but I really like Jesus. I don't know if you know that, but I went through a period where we didn't talk, and then we reconciled. I'm pretty sure it was mostly my fault, and as I really began to dig into Jesus' teachings again a few years ago, it's like, really, has it always said that? You know, I'd read, or like the Sermon on the Mount particularly, I read it, it's like, has that always been in there? And it still happens. I did a series here on a Wednesday night on the Sermon on the Mount a couple years ago, and in the preface to Emmett Fox's wonderful book on the Sermon on the Mount, he describes the teachings of Jesus being like the diamond mines. And he said, in the top level of the yellow clay, there are diamonds. But if they dig deeper into the blue clay, the diamonds are 10 times more prevalent. And that's how these teachings are. We may get the surface, but the deeper we go, the more time we spend, the more open we are to having something new come to us, the more is revealed. So I'd like to read to you Matthew chapter 7. This is the end of what is recorded as the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, as it did today in Houston. The streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So here's the deal. We're looking for some sure things. We're looking for a life that will deliver on its promises, that will not disappoint us. We're looking for a way to stand in life that doesn't surprise and hurt us, right? If you look at the passages preceding this, in this wonderful Sermon on the Mount, which all scholars agree, this is the best distillation of what this historical figure, this rabbi who lived in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, he existed, and this is what he taught. Before this, he says, the passage that I read a couple weeks ago about why worry about what you wear, why worry about what you're going to eat? God takes care of the birds of the field and the lilies of the field, right? And then, so store up your treasure in heaven. Then he talks about seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And then he talks about this other weird part where he says, the scripture says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you that if your eye offends you, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, take it off and throw it away. That is some weird stuff. And he also talks about, there's another thing, I just read it this morning. He talks about you can't serve two masters. He said you can't serve God and money. Like, what is the common theme in all of these things? And it's this: don't look to the world for your security. And this idea about the law of Hammurabi, the Code of Hammurabi, which was civil rights legislation of its time, fairness, proportionality. When somebody does something wrong to you in the world, you get back them, but proportionately. You can't kill them in all their village if they offend you. You have to, it's one for one. It was a really smart thing to do in the world. And Jesus was saying that's not going to cut it. What he's saying is that anything that takes you out of the peace of God will not last. You can't depend upon it. So if your eye, and this is figurative, he's not suggesting that we deform ourselves and disfigure ourselves. He's saying that if we get caught somewhere, look another place. Give it no energy. Pull away from that. That's not where it's at. When he says you can't serve two masters, God and money, how many of you are serving the master of your 401k? Thinking this is what's going to cause me security, this is what's going to allow me to be okay in this world. We do this because we need a place to stand in this world where we are safe and we won't be hurt by the surprises of life. And what Jesus keeps showing us again and again and again, it's not out there. It's within. And so all of these teachings he's been offering in the Sermon on the Mount, it leads to this idea that the kingdom of heaven is within us. And when we seek to live a life based upon spiritual principle, then we can withstand the changes and the surprises and the losses and the diagnoses and the soul house. Our identity, the thing that we know that we're okay, it's not destroyed because our identity and our safety was never out there. It was never in this physical body. It's going to age. It's going to die for all of us. Everything in the world of form is temporary. Everything. And if you're looking to those things in the world of form for your security and your way of being okay in the world, it will not work. And this is terrifying and sad until you get on the other side of it and you shift your perspective and you realize, oh, everything I need to feel safe and secure and loved and supported in this life, it's already here. The mind that was in Christ Jesus that is also in you. The kingdom of heaven, don't look here or there, it's within you. And Jesus says, if you will live, if you will listen to these teachings I'm giving you, and Jesus isn't the only one that has given us these teachings. These truths come in many, many forms from many, many wonderful, wise spiritual masters. But if you begin to live your life on the idea that I am an eternal, deathless, birthless, changeless being, I'm here to experience God and discover God anew every moment and every breath, and you expect that, and you allow that to come into your life, you're good. You're good. What I want us to do is get comfortable with the fact that everything changes. Everything changes. We've been talking about, we're going through a little bit of a change here at Unity. Some think it's good, some are not sure, but we got some changes. But if we can get comfortable with the idea that source, God is my source, God is my power, God gives me everything. You were singing it, I heard you. Get comfortable with this idea that the spiritual reality that is already within you never changes, never goes away. Then whatever comes your way comes for you. Everything. And I know some of you are going through some tough things. And I know this is hard. Walt Whitman said, there are those who only teach the lessons of peace and safety. But I teach those I love of destruction, that when it comes, they are prepared. It's kind of a bummer. But what he's trying to point us to is this idea. You don't need any of that to be the child of God you are. You can have it all taken away, and you're going to be okay. The last thing I want to leave you with is this, and I didn't really shorten my sermon enough, but I wanted to leave you this one idea. Form will change, but you're creating new forms all the time. And when you begin to live upon these principles that Jesus taught, when one form goes away, the next one you call in is from your higher perspective. Emerson says this, we release our angels that our archangels may come in. So whatever the thing is that's wanting to leave your life and you're holding on for dear life, I invite you to let it go. Because what wants to come in is of a higher magnitude. It's of a greater revelation of love. Life is for you. And if we can move with the flow of it, it gets better and better. And then we lay our bodies down, and then I think it gets really good, is what I think. I love you guys. God bless you.